Okay, so before I get started onto my actual story that I'm going to share today, I want to talk about why I'm up here. I was mentioned earlier that starting on August 10th, we'll be hosting a workshop on storytelling for social change. And this story that I am sharing is something that I workshopped many years ago with an organization called Listen for a Change. I've since learned a lot more from other people who are excellent public speakers about how to share stories. And I'd be really interested in having you all join me there and learn about your stories and the experiences that you've had that have shaped your views on uh, very complicated and complex issues that we are faced in our society. So as I get started today, I also want to remind people again that this may have some triggering topics for some people. It talks about a little bit about gun violence and school shootings. So if that is a difficult topic for you, please remember there are fidget devices available. There are tissues available in the rows, and if you do need to step out at any point, I would not be offended by that. But without further ado, I'm going to get started. Um, so, for those of you that don't know me, hi, my name's Nick, and I think an important thing to share about myself with this story is that I'm a 90s kid. I was born in 1996. This past year, I just turned 29 in May. Um, and being a 90s kid, I grew up on some very unique experiences of the 90s. Particularly, I was a really big fan of Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z. But when I was a kid, we would go to the dollar store a lot. And one of the first toys that I ended up buying at the dollar store was this orange uh, revolver that they actually discontinued, probably because of a lawsuit. This orange revolver that they sold at the dollar store, you could put these little fireworks sparks in it. And when you pull the trigger, it would make a loud popping noise and it would send sparks flying out of the front of the gun. And when I first had held a gun that was a real gun, I had already played with this orange revolver. I'd already played around with things like Nerf guns and other kinds of like squirt guns and toy guns and things like that. But my dad took me out to the range for the first time and he started talking to me about all of the ways that we needed to be practicing safety with firearms. He talked about not pointing it at anybody, only putting my finger on the trigger when I was ready to shoot, that I needed to make sure that the safety was on anytime I put it down. All these things that I had not been practicing when I was playing around with all of these toy guns. Um, and he put this gun in my hand, and I was still very young, and it was this silver handgun, and I couldn't quite fit my fingers around the trigger. And he kept explaining to me how to pull the trigger on this gun, and I thought it was really funny because he kept explaining this to me, and I couldn't even actually pull the trigger myself because I was so young and my hands were so small. And when I first pulled the trigger, it shot so far of the target that I got really frustrated, and I actually walked away and went back inside and stopped for the day. But eventually, my grandfather and my dad, we went out to the range a normal amount of times every year, and they kept teaching me how to shoot guns. And it was kind of like in a similar experience, similar to like going fishing with them or going out on a bike ride with them. It was a bonding time between me and my dad, or me and my grandfather. One particular time, my grandfather had taken me out, and we had been shooting a rifle that he had just bought, and he had bought a scope for this, and he was showing me all the ways to get the gun zeroed in on the target. He put a metal plate out in the field, and it was the first time he had shot it since we had zeroed in the sights. And he walked me through how to shoot from prone. And when I first pulled the trigger, I hit the plate right in the middle, and something unexpected happened. We put a hole in the plate, and he was so excited by this. He was very proud of this, and he kept that plate for years and would brag to me about how how proud of me he was when I did that. And the thing is that growing up, I received a lot of these messages about guns that were soon to be challenged, because growing up in the 90s meant that I also was born 2 years before the Columbine massacre. And if you're not familiar with what that is, the Columbine massacre is where two high school students went into their high school and they shot and killed multiple classmates and wounded several others. There's a whole documentary out there on this if you'd like to know more. Um, I didn't know about the Columbine massacre for a long time. It was never something that came into my awareness until I was in high school myself. And by the time I got to high school, things had started to change about the ways that we interacted with guns in high school and in schools in general. By the time I got to high school, they had started to shut down the ability of students to walk between classes by going outdoors because of the threat of somebody entering the building through one of the open and unlocked doors. You could only get into the building through the top of the hill at the school. And they continued to implement more security measures and hire more school resource officers to hopefully prevent a shooting from taking place. They also started to have us practice active shooter drills. And the first time that we practiced an active shooter drill, they announced over the intercom, "Teachers Protect Your Dragons." It was their code word. And when they announced "Teachers Protect Your Dragons" over the intercom, they said to us, okay, we need to turn the lights off. We're going to lock the doors and we're going to huddle in the corner. And it was like we were waiting for a nuclear bomb to drop. I never really took these very seriously. Anytime a shooting had taken place, it was something that just happened on the news. I never really expected to experience an actual lockdown. But when they announced over the intercom, "Teachers Protect Your Dragons," myself and my classmates, we got up and did as we'd been told. My teacher, she turned the lights off and she locked the doors. And we huddled in the corner. But my classmates and I were not quiet like we had been told. One of us was sharing a meme off of iFunny to their friend and laughing quietly in the corner. And another was gossiping with her friend about the latest rumors that she had heard about her friend's boyfriend. When this happened, my teacher stood up over us and she kind of huddled down a little bit and like tried to get our attention. And she whispered in this quiet, terrified voice, "You need to shut up." You can fill in the 4-letter word she used. "This is real. I don't know what's going on. I don't have any information about what's happening, but this isn't a drill. You need to be quiet." The silence that fell over the room in that moment still sits with me to this day. I often wonder what might have been going through my teacher's mind when that happened, when they announced over that intercom, "Teachers Protect Your Dragons," and she had to lock the doors and we weren't being quiet. Did she think that she was going to have to die for us that day? Did she think that she was going to have to stand between the shooter and us? We had no information about what was happening. The next day, I remember one of my teachers talking about the fact that he had grabbed an American flag out of its stand in his classroom, and he had furled the flag into his hands, and he had used the spear tip point of the flag. It was this little, like, almost like an ace on a playing card. And he said to us, I prepared that so that if he came into the classroom, I could skewer him. And I often wonder if her thoughts were like mine the second time that I was under an active shooter threat at school. It was announced over in an early alert system that somebody had threatened to come to the school and commit an act of violence, and that they had planted a bomb on campus when I was in college. They said nothing to really worry about, law enforcement is on it. But when they sent this out, I deliberated with my mom and my then girlfriend about whether or not to go. And ultimately, we decided that we weren't going to be made to feel afraid to go to class and go to school. But I do sometimes wish I hadn't gone that day, because what happened next for me was nearly 2 years of anxiety and fear and a constant state of worry that, because of that state of worry, I can't really remember much of my junior year of college. When I went to class that day, I sat in the back of the room as I'd always done, and I realized that there was no exit. The only exit that there was in the room was at the front of the room, and there was no window to get out. All I could do was just sit there, and if somebody came in, I was going to be definitely getting shot. All I could think about was the fact that if this person came in, I couldn't do anything to fight back. I ended up moving to the front of the class with this delusion in my mind that, well, maybe if I'm at the front of the class, I can try to get out of this door. And if they come in this door, maybe I can be the hero and stop this person from hurting me and hurting my classmates. I worried the whole day, is my girlfriend okay? Is my friend going to be okay? What about all of the other classmates? I watched a disabled woman be questioned about a bag that she had kept out in the hallway with her oxygen tank. And this sense of paranoia existed all across campus that day. I wish that that fear, that anxiety that stuck with me that day had gone away. But for the rest of my next junior year, I sat in class and all I could think about was all of the ways that I might get hurt, that my classmates might be hurt, that the people that were teaching might be hurt. I started attending more active shooter drills and simulations in this hope that maybe I'll learn something that will keep me safe. But unfortunately, as it only made my worries worse, because I watched them talk about how even a trained SWAT police officer would often get shot first if he tried to respond and disarm the person or shoot the person or do anything to intervene. The only thing that they really said was effective was to either to run or to hide. And if you couldn't do that, then the last resort was to fight. This came to a head for me when I opened the news one day, and I read the news about the Las Vegas shooting in Nevada, when over 400 people attending a concert were wounded, and 65 people were shot and killed by a man who had perched himself on, I believe, the 30th floor of a hotel. He had opened fire, and it sounded like automatic fire because he had modified his gun to simulate automatic fire. And I watched the news as the only thing that was being offered were thoughts and prayers. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, and probably I think the only time in my life, I had a panic attack. I thought, nowhere is safe. Elementary schools are not safe. My high school is not safe. My college isn't safe. Nightclubs are not safe. Movie theaters are not safe. Where can I go? At the end of one of the articles where they were talking about this tragedy, they talked about the importance of picking up the phone and calling your representatives. And it was the first time that I actually called one of my reps. And I asked them that, what are we willing to do to solve this problem? Why can we not get anything done? And I continue to talk about this story because even to this day, very little is being done to pass new laws or change any policies around gun violence in this country. I tell this story too because, to me, something notable in this story is that there is an absence of tragedy in the story. I'm thankful that no one has died for me to come to the point where I felt the need to advocate, to change the laws around around guns in this country, to do something to address gun violence. And I'm hopeful that in talking with people about my experience, that they will open the conversation for what we are willing to do to address this problem together. Thank you for listening to my story today. And I encourage you that if you would like to share your own story, to come and attend the workshop that we'll be hosting on the 10th. Thank you.